with the features in Ashby, I can actually describe these criteria. So I can put in these things I'm looking for, and then we'll have LLMs read the resume and will indicate whether or not these skills are present. So once you start interviewing someone, we believe that is something that requires human judgment kind of almost all the way through. A huge part of it that I touched on early on is like this data piece where, we help companies understand their process better and optimize it. It's a pretty recent thing that companies have really invested in automating the more complicated parts of the process. And we're definitely seeing more of it, but we're definitely not fully there yet.
Our sponsor for this episode is Extreme Networks, the company radically improving customer experiences with AI-powered automation for networking. Extreme is driving the convergence of AI, networking, and security to transform the way businesses connect and protect their networks to deliver faster performance, stronger security, and a seamless user experience. Visit extremenetworks.com to learn more. That's Extreme Networks, all run together.com to learn more.
I'm excited to get started. Thanks for having me here. My name is Benji, co-founder, CEO of Ashby. My background before starting this company was all in software engineering. And then in my most recent company, I was a director of engineering and pretty much spent all my time hiring engineers onto my team. That was really hard and competitive. It was back in San Francisco in like 2015 to 2018. And it was very hard to hire engineers. And so I got really deeply involved in recruiting tools, our overall recruiting process. And I had a lot of issues with the tools we were using. There was like a lack of automation, a lack of data and insights, and that was kind of slowing us down on this really top priority. And so, that was almost 6.5 years ago. And eventually decided that I think we should build something from scratch with more modern technology that's really focused on companies that are hiring top talent in really competitive spaces. And that brings us here. We're basically offering an end-to-end recruiting platform for in-house teams. So it covers everything from posting jobs, getting people to apply, sourcing passive candidates, moving everyone through the interview process, and then all the way for extending offers. So that's kind of the scope of the product today. And we serve about 2,700 customers, a lot of them in the technology space.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's, isn't Zuckerberg offering $100 million salaries? I don't know how real that is.
Yeah, I know. The rumors are, but probably not totally off from all the data points we're seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly total comp, I guess, if you include options and stuff. But I guess my first question is, what were the problems that you saw? You don't have to name the other platforms, but what were the problems that you saw that the other platforms weren't offering that you wanted to correct with Ashby?
Yeah, one of the key ones was data and analytics. So I think for some background there, a lot of the other platforms were started around 2012 or before. And back then, recruiting teams weren't used to working with data in like a day-to-day basis. But as hiring has become more competitive, a lot of recruiting teams are now operating more like a go-to-market team, like sales and marketing, and they're increasingly have an operations team supporting them. And with that, a lot more data is being used to make decisions, to optimize the process, to figure out, what is our comp strategy, where are we losing candidates, all these kind of questions. And we weren't able to answer these with these other products. It was a lot of manual work. And so reporting was one key piece. And then the second part was kind of automation across a lot of different areas of the process. This was like pre-LLMs, but still a lot of companies were trying to become more efficient at this like competitive hiring process. And so they were using an applicant tracking system, which is like the name for this kind of category of software we're in. But then they were adding separate products, one for like automating interview scheduling, which can be really time consuming and manual, one for automating like outreach to candidates that you're trying to source for your company. And so the second opportunity we saw was kind of bundling all these products together to bring like this core operating system, this applicant tracking system, but then also add all the automation in a single product. And so these are probably the two biggest insights we had back then.
Yeah, and the data. What kind of you're talking about data about the candidate pool, or data about churn within the organization, or what kind of data is important in this case?
Today we're really focused on the recruiting process. And so if you think of that, it's like a funnel with a lot of different stages, and there can be drop off at different stages. Like I remember when we were hiring for my engineering team, we had certain channels where candidates were coming from where we only had like a 10% offer acceptance rate, which is pretty abysmal. Like if you extend 9 offers or 10 offers, you only get one candidate to actually join. You're spinning your wheels. And so it's really about all these metrics throughout the process. And that also includes like how long does it take to schedule candidates, where are candidates dropping off, why are we losing out on offers, where are good candidates coming from, how many referrals are we getting. All these operational questions in the recruiting process is what we're really focused on today. And it's kind of surprising if you haven't worked in a larger recruiting organization, there's a surprising amount of complexity in
Mhm.
actually scaling a team.
Yeah. And your customer base, are they small and medium? Or are they big
Yeah,
corporations, or a lot of them, are they tech companies or companies that are not in the tech space but are hiring tech teams?
Yeah, so we started more in tech because that's where there was the most competition for talent. And so that's where our product got the most uptake, because if you have a competitive process, then you need more data to make decisions. And then today, really serve 1 to above 10,000. So our bigger customers include Shopify or Snowflake, like large public technology companies. We also have OpenAI as a customer, who's not huge yet, but growing extremely fast. And then we also have a lot of earlier stage companies to like ramp kind of probably in the middle of the pack. But then also we have a lot of like 5-person startups joining us too, because they know that hiring and talent is really important, and they want to start with the right product that can kind of grow with them over time. And then we
Yeah.
are expanding into non-tech as well, but tech is definitely kind of still the bigger portion of the customer base.
Yeah, and this platform is used by the HR departments at companies. It's not a platform, sort of a platform that candidates, post their resumes to, and like Indeed or something like that.
That's right. Yes. So we use primarily by the recruiting teams within HR and then the hiring managers. But a lot of candidates know about us now. If they've been applying to a lot of tech jobs or AI companies, then they will see the Ashby brand out there quite frequently. But there's no candidate. The candidate only interacts with the company through Ashby, but they don't have their own profile or anything like that. That's right.
Yeah, because yeah, I mean, the question is really, I mean, managing the process is one thing, but finding the candidates is increasingly difficult, isn't it? What do you do? Is there anything in Ashby that helps hiring managers or HR managers identify candidates, or is it once they have a candidate, then Ashby takes over?
There are a few different parts of the product, but in general, we support what is called the inbound channel. So all the people that are applying to companies. So Ashby helps post these jobs and then collects all the people that are expressing interest in your company. Then there's also other modules, like we have a sourcing module. If I'm like interested in your background, you're not applying to my company, we can find your contact information. We can send you an email outreach and try to compel you to interview with us. So we also have the outreach piece. In terms of finding candidates, most of our customers in technology are kind of using LinkedIn as a primary place to identify people that they want to reach out to if they're not already
Mm.
coming inbound. But the interesting thing in the job market over the last 2 or 3 years in tech is actually a lot more people are coming inbound than it used to. It used to be a difficult channel, but a lot of our customers are now making more than half of their hires from applicants that are coming into Ashby. And for applicants that are coming into the platform, we do help them use through AI actually identify kind of the potentially best fit talent in what is increasingly a bigger pool of applicants. So we do help with that part.
Yeah, and the applicants, and I'm interested mostly in the AI sector.
Yeah.
Applicants coming in through whatever channel, are they primarily people looking to change jobs, or are they people coming out of master's programs or even PhD programs who are looking for jobs?
Yeah, we have a mix of all sorts of talent depending on the strategy of each of our customers, but it's usually a blend, of like tenured people and internships, new grads. So it's a pretty broad range.
Yeah. And is there something on Ashby that helps a hiring manager evaluate the candidates, or is it simply sort of tracking them through the process? I don't mean simply,
Yeah,
but
yeah, no, yeah, I totally get your point. Where we have deployed AI, and I know we're going to go a bit deeper in that, but one of the key areas we launched a little bit over a year ago now is at the kind of resume review stage, we can help a team identify the potentially ideal candidates. And so one example is I'm hiring product managers for my team today.
mm,
I actually want people to have a product background. Ideally, they were a founder before and they have a software engineering background. That's like pretty hard to find combination. And the last time we posted a role, we got about 2,000 applicants. But with the features in Ashby, I can actually describe these criteria. So I can put in these things I'm looking for, and then we'll have LLMs read the resume and will indicate whether or not these skills are present. So instead of reading every resume line by line, I can have AI help me kind of scan the resume, find the relevant skills, and then let me kind of filter through the applicant pool that way. And that's something that really wasn't possible pre-LLMs in a reliable way, but has really changed how a lot of companies use kind of this inbound channel, because now you can sift through like thousands of candidates more efficiently. And so we help with that part. Once you start interviewing someone, we believe that is something that requires human judgment kind of almost all the way through.
yeah.
We have a lot of like features that help manage the process, but we don't really take the judgment out of the process. We think that's humans' job
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just saw an article, and my wife of I and I have talked about this a lot because, as I said, we have a generation through our kids and nieces and nephews who ask for advice. And, I'm sort of old school. I tell everybody, yeah, the resume should all be on one page. And I saw an article recently saying that that's bad advice because all this stuff is getting read by LLMs now. And what is the case? I mean, can you send in a 5-page resume? Is the LLM going to scan it? Is it to the point now where the more information you have, the better for
That's
that
a great
first?
question. Yeah. I definitely think you want to have your key accomplishments on that resume, because otherwise it's hard for anyone to identify them. That said, in our case, our customers really do a combination of this AI assisted first pass of like trying to figure out which resumes to look at first, but then you also still have a human looking at it. And so 5-page resume is probably not optimal either. So, probably 1 to 2 pages is still good if you can bring in like your key relevant skills for that job. But if you have like closed $100K deals, or you have shipped code in a certain language, you want to have these details on the resume, because that will help in case people are looking for these skills. So, but it's definitely
Oh,
changing. Yeah, you have to kind of optimize right now for the machine and the human kind of at the same time, ideally.
yeah, yeah, and I guess the LLMs these days are smart enough that it's not simply picking out keywords. It's understanding
Yeah,
what's being expressed on the resume.
that's been the
Uh,
exciting change, I think, where recruiters were historically pretty good at keyword search, but keyword search is very literal, and so if someone used a slightly different phrasing or an adjacent skill, they would be missed in this kind of pile of resumes. And now the LM actually has like, yeah, this kind of semantic understanding, which we've seen really helpful in terms of accuracy, and it's one of the areas that LMs are actually really really good at. So that's why we decided to ship that.
yeah, and a lot of jobs I hear, there'll be an entry level job or even more senior job, and companies will get 10,000 applications, partly because now you don't have to lick an envelope and find a stamp. I mean, you can do it all online, so people sort of flood the zone. Uh, what percentage generally, is there some metric? What percentage of resumes make that first LLM pass?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I had prepared a stat on my end, because we actually have this data on our like trends report. But um, and the way to think about it is like our customers don't actually have the LLM do the first pass and then a human. It's actually side by side. So let's say we get 2,000 applicants. we look at every resume, but we start with the ones that seem like the strongest fit. We go for them first with the mindset of like, these are probably people we want to move forward. Then we see at the bottom people that don't seem to meet most of our criteria. They may just mass applied. They're not actually a good fit for the role. And we can go through the mindset of these are probably not a fit. So it just speeds up the human review, but it's still always a human going through and making a decision on each of the resumes. The interview rate, that's a good question. I think it probably hovers somewhere between like 1 and 10% on average. It really depends
Yeah.
on the volume of interviews, but that's kind of roughly what you can think of. And you did touch on a point there where we are seeing more tools on the candidate side too that make it easier to mass apply to jobs, and that increases the numbers, but doesn't necessarily always mean there's a great fit. So
Yeah, that's right.
yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
1 to 10% is probably a good benchmark.
Yeah, and when you say that it's done side by side, it just seems I've never hired at that level,
Yeah,
but it seems that uh, if you get 1,000 resumes in, you would just shoot them all through the LLM first, and at least have them rank them. Is that what Ashby does, or
exactly. We can rank
yeah,
them, but we don't do like what companies do in our space, which we shy away from. Is we don't say like you're an 87 out of 100 and you're a 52 out of 100. Instead, we take these objective criteria that you defined, and we just say like, could we find it on the resume? Yes or no.
mhm,
And if yes, where's the evidence for it? And so it's really like an assistant reader that's very objective based on the criteria that you set out, which is a little bit different.
yeah,
We think is kind of the right way to go about it.
yeah, and then the humans then go through the top 100 or something. If there are 10,000 resumes come in, uh,
Yeah, it depends on the team. There's a lot that go through every single one, but if you have the assistant to read a resume, it can take like a second or two to just validate, like, okay, this person, they applied for a software engineering job, but they actually never worked as a software engineer. And you
right?
make a quick gut check and then you move forward. But there are different approaches. We do generally recommend that humans still look at everyone. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So how has this industry, and Ashby in particular, how do you think it's changing hiring practices? Is it making it easier to find uh, the right fit? Uh, I mean, is it, it just seems like there's, on the one hand, there are a lot of people that have, again, I'm talking about AI, that
Yeah.
have gone to undergraduate or boot camps or something that have a feel for AI, that can code. And those are the kinds of people who are not finding jobs, and that people like Meta are laying, or Microsoft are laying off,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of that can be automated. But at the top, there's kind of a shortage of talent. That's why you have talk of $100 million annual salaries.
Yeah.
Uh, where do you see the market? I mean, are is that top tier talent growing at all? And if it's growing, where is it coming from? Is it international students that have? I mean, I'm talking about the U.S. market
Yeah.
primarily. We can talk about international, but is it people coming into the country? Is it people coming out of graduate programs? And is there enough of a pipeline to meet the need? And what do the people that went to boot camps expecting to have a
Yeah.
high flying career? What do they do?
It's a great set of questions, and I'll try to take them one at a time. I think the interesting thing about this narrative of entry level jobs and AI and automation, I don't think it's perfectly accurate. I think a big part of what we saw in the last few years is kind of a readjustment of the 2021-22 period, where a lot of these tech companies hired like literally tens of thousands of people in a single year, and they pulled so much talent into companies that are just overstaffed for the size they should be at. And that's even outside of AI or automation. There's like, if you talk to someone at Google or Microsoft, there will be stories of teams just being too big to actually move
Yeah,
efficiently. And so I think AI is like a good story of like why these redundancies are happening, but in practice, it's often just like we hire too many people, and we need to right size the business. So I think that's a big part. Then there is definitely still really strong competition for talent, but it is more at the senior level. There's just a lot of supply of people with 0 to 2 years experience. So I think that's a challenge right now with this dislocation we had in the market. We're adjusted from this like big overhiring, and now we're pulling back. Where people are pulling back the most is at the entry level, where people that join at that level, they aren't that productive, they're not that accretive to the business. That you invest in them for like future growth, but if you can also just hire senior talent instead at a higher price, then that's kind of what companies are opting for a bit more. In terms of practical advice, I think startups still have a hard time to hire talent, especially early stage ones. So if you have any hands-on experience actually building something, even if that's on the side, and you can demonstrate that, I think that's a great place to launch a career. There are a lot of scrappy companies out there. They're looking for people that can actually build stuff. So especially if you have coding skills, putting projects out there, side projects, posting about them will give you a good amount of visibility.
Yeah. And that top tier talent, is it coming out of graduate schools or is it coming from overseas?
Um, there's a mix of all sorts of channels, but I think in general there's still a big shortage of software engineers that are meeting the bar for like a senior software engineer at
Right.
any technology companies. You're just gonna like every company, every startup, every founder I talk to has a hard time hiring as many engineers as they'd like. But the background can be all over the place. I mean, there are obviously a lot of the traditional, Stanford grads or Harvard grads, but when it comes to software engineering, it's much more about the practical skills, and there are a lot of people that
Yeah.
have an untraditional background, and just have demonstrated that they can code on the side and may never even completed a degree. So
Yeah.
there's no real strong pattern there. Yeah.
Yeah. And does Ashby, I mean, what do you do when someone submits a portfolio, for example? Or is that later in the process?
Tends to be later. For design roles, it may happen early, but it's part of that human review. So the LM again will read resume, will try to find if you have like the key criteria, and then a human will take a look at that as kind of the first step. And I think you asked this other question earlier that I also wanted to touch on, of like how do we help companies kind of solve these talent problems or get better at hiring. And a huge part of it that I touched on early on is like this data piece, where we help companies understand their process better and optimize it, and that can include things like you've hired, you know, 10 software engineers in the past. Here's how many applicants it took you to hire a single person. So if you post this job, you know roughly how many applicants you need before you will make one hire. Then you can use that to decide how long you want to leave this role open. Then you may look at your process and you notice that you have a drop off at a certain stage. And then you can take a close look at that and see if like these particular interviews are too hard, or if they're interviewers that are grading too harshly. And so a lot of the optimization that Ashby offers is around this kind of data and data analysis that helps you refine your process.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. And how often do people, I mean, again, from your data and
Yeah,
analysis, hire the wrong person? Is that a problem? I would
that
guess it
is
is.
that is certainly a problem, and it varies pretty highly. We actually don't have like perfect visibility into that because we do end at like the hire process. We did roll out something about a year ago we call quality of hire surveys, and that is something that will trigger a survey to the hiring manager at a cadence that you can choose. Internally, we do 30, 60, 90 days. So we start to collect this post-hire data, and we can see like where better people coming from, how does it correlate with the interviews. But yes, people definitely hire the wrong people. Interviews are highly imperfect, but that is a big area that we are helping our customers on, is like collecting the data post-hire, then again understanding which interviewers or which interviews are more predictive of performance, which channels tend to produce better candidates. And
Yeah.
we can help with all of that. But yeah, that's a big problem for sure.
Yeah. And the channels, what are the channels?
Yeah. So inbound, broadly speaking, is one, and then within that, you can have different job boards. It could be LinkedIn, Indeed. Depending on your industry, some of these will give you better fit candidates. And then outbound is another one. So again, if we have a team that's going to reach out to candidates that are not actively applying and interviewing, and we source them, that's an important channel. Referral is the other channel that tends to be really important early on, where you're asking your employees to submit people that they have worked with in the past, and obviously have like some pretty deep knowledge of their skills. And then internal mobility is another one, and that's actually increasing for our bigger customers, especially at a time when they aren't hiring as much externally. You see more people move internal into different roles. And then if we look at our data, internal mobility is obviously one of the best channels. So you already know so much about this person based on your organization. And then referral can be another generally good one if you have a good referral program in place, because if you have strong talent on the team, then the chance that they know strong talent can be quite high.
Yeah, that internal thing is interesting. Organizations are big. Does it typically happen that one department will post a job company wide and people will apply, or can you scan an organization and say, here are people with the proper skills, here's their current job,
Yeah.
we could replace them with a cheaper person and move them over to this? Are there tools to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So today is definitely more the former, where people are applying and expressing interest in roles, but we are rolling out AI functionality to generally find past talent that you've interacted with in Ashby. And so if you think about our customers, they've hired each like a couple hundred or 1,000 people, but they have, sometimes millions of candidates that they have some touch point with in the past. And what we can do now with AI is resurface these automatically. So if you're opening a new job, we can say like, hey, here are all these people that you've interviewed before or hired before, or that expressed interest in your company that you didn't interview, and revisit them. And that's something that's pretty exciting because it's something companies have been trying to do for many years, but pre-AI, it was really hard. And every search kind of started from scratch, but now we can use all this historical data to surface people, including internal candidates that could be a good fit.
Yeah. And so I would guess you saw the opportunity, you guys jumped into it, but a lot of other people are jumping into it. How do you see the market, and how are you growing?
Yeah. We are more than doubling year over year for the last couple of years. I think can pretty confidently say that in our space, we're probably not the fastest growing vendor. A big advantage we had is coming into the space in 2018, when again all these other solutions were 5, 6 years older, and the talent market really changed in, especially in software, around like 2015 or so. There was like much more private capital. The competition again for like senior engineering talent really exploded. The number of startups exploded, and so we really built for this new way of acquiring talent and these more sophisticated recruiting teams that work with data. And so we have a pretty big leg up, I think, because we were lucky in the timing and we had it inside a couple of years before everyone else. And then we have been able to build this all-in-one product. So instead of buying like a lot of different solutions, we have a single platform for our buyers to kind of run this entire process. And that especially useful now with AI, where we can use all these different touch points. It can be, we're about to launch call recording. So if you have conversations with candidates, all of these are recorded, all the emails that you're writing, all the feedback forms, all the notes, all this data is in a single platform, and that creates some really valuable data that's hard to replicate. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And so building the product out, you're doubling every year. Do you have to, is there a lot of pressure to keep expanding the product? And what's the vision? Where do you see Ashby going?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, fortunately, our customers are really happy with the velocity at which we're improving the product and shipping features. That's something we focused on pretty early. Both my co-founder and I have an engineering background, and I spend a lot of time hiring engineers, so we were able to build a really strong engineering team. Um, the so people are really happy with what we have today. We do definitely have quite ambitious plans to expand into areas that we're not quite talking about publicly yet. But today we're really focused on this kind of recruiting challenge, and especially with AI, there's a ton of opportunity to rethink a bunch of areas of the product that we built a couple of years ago pre LLMs. So that's kind of
Yeah.
our immediate focus.
And is it getting to the point that the hiring process, uh, all of the sort of tedious work is being automated, and so hiring managers can really focus on interviewing and the candidates? Or has that always been the case? It's just taken care of by back office people?
Yeah, It's definitely not always been the case. Part of my reason to start Ashby was when I was in the hiring manager role, about half of my recruiting team was spending all their time coordinating interviews because they can be pretty complex interview loops. We used to do like 4-hour on-sites, and we need people with specific skills and need to go in a certain order. And so we had a recruiting coordination team where all their time was spent just scheduling interviews. And that was one of my insights back then was like, hey, I think computers are really good at organizing calendars, so let's try to
Yeah.
automate that. But it's a pretty recent thing that companies have really invested in, is like automating the more complicated parts of the process. And we're definitely seeing more of it, but we're definitely not fully there yet. But the goal with Ashby is to get to the kind of core competencies, which are how do you make your company attractive to people such that they want to express interest? How do you evaluate candidates, because we think that requires humans? And then how do you close them once they have competing offers? That's really where we're kind of focused on, and we're trying to eliminate everything else. But even things like scheduling interviews today, we can automate 80%. With LLMs, we're going to try to get it to like 90, 95. But some of these problems are incredibly hard to solve in like a real world setting. So there's still a good amount of opportunity left.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, things always sound easy in theory, but in practice,
That's also the
there's a lot
unintuitive
of,
thing about AI, how LLMs work, is like you see the news of like, models solving some math Olympiad problems, but they can't actually be an executive assistant because they don't have all the context necessary. They're kind of smart on unknown problems they've seen before, but not very smart on things where they need a lot of context. So
yeah. Well, and actually, that's an interesting point. Does Ashby do anything to build context? Um,
yeah,
maybe the personality profiles of the people on the team that the candidate would be joining, or something like that.
no, today it's really more about all this data we collect, and we started making that more accessible. So we now have this thing we call Candidate Assistant. So if I go to your profile in Ashby, I can ask any question, the way I would ask ChatGPT a question, and we'll pull from any kind of data source we have. That can be past conversations, feedback, anything. And that's been really helpful because I can go in and be like, okay, why has this candidate left their most recent job? If I was an interviewer asking a question, historically it would have been really hard to find it out. Now I can get an extra transcript with that conversation. And so we're collecting all this data and then making it available to AI and to the end user. And there are more and more workflows where we can start embedding that kind of stuff. And then another thing we launched only a couple months ago, which is really exciting for candidates. A lot of people have experienced interviewing somewhere, maybe going for like 3 to 4 rounds of interviews and then getting a very generic rejection email, which is like, sorry, we're not moving forward.
Yeah.
Because it's actually time consuming and hard to give compliant feedback on a process. But we made that pretty easy by introducing like a special email token you can include in your email, and we'll automatically pull all the feedback. We'll sanitize it, and we'll give you like a nice version of feedback that a candidate can take home. And the recruiters can now do that in like 2 seconds, where before it would have taken like 30 minutes per candidate to compile that. And so there's some really interesting stuff we can do with all that data to also humanize the process a bit more.
Yeah, and hiring successfully, you were saying that one of the things that Ashby does is sort of track when people drop out of the process, why they drop out of the process. What are the reasons that a hiring
Yep.
uh, process would lose somebody?
Yeah. So there are obviously two broad categories. One is you decided not to move forward with a candidate, and then the other is a candidate pulled out of the process. For candidates pulling out, speed is a really important one. Like the best candidates are not in the market very, very
Right.
long. They'll have multiple conversations. So it's actually an area where Ashby with the product and all the automation helps. We can bring someone through an interview process in like 20 days if you set it up really well. And if your competitor takes 30 or 40 days, then you may have signed offer before they finish the process of another team. So speed is like a huge area that we're focused on. Other things, compensation. Companies are getting better now about posting that upfront, having these discussions early, but that can cause misalignments and waste a lot of time if you are misaligned on compensation at the last step of the process. And when it comes for you rejecting candidates, what we really try companies to focus on is try to eliminate candidates as early as possible because it's going to be more efficient, right? What you see in miscalibrated interview processes is a lot of people make it through all the way to the last round, and then most candidates drop off there. And that means your team has wasted hundreds of hours
Right.
interviewing candidates they didn't actually hire. So these are all the knobs that you can kind of tweak in a process.
Yeah. And as the economy becomes increasingly digital, presumably demand for this kind of thing will grow. How do you see the market developing
Yeah, I think we're
for
basically
your?
the way you can think about it, we are benefiting most companies the most that are either hiring competitive talent or are hiring at a large volume. So, but especially competitive talent, as you can see with these like AI offers you touched on earlier, it's generally increasing. And in our customer base, the AI companies are the ones that are about growing the fastest. And I think the kind of return to outlier talent is increasing, right? So people that are really good at their job are being able to be even better with AI and some of the new tools. And so I think we may see some lower hiring volumes in some industries, but the competition for that talent that is being hired is going to go up. And that increases the need for more sophisticated recruiting teams and more sophisticated recruiting processes. And so that trend we've been seeing kind of growing in our favor. And then this recruiting operations role that I touched on earlier is also growing in importance, where the recruiting team used to just be recruiters, but now there's this operations layer that's really focused on tooling and data and automation to kind of get the most out of every single recruiter on the team and do more with less. And that's also in our favor.
And are you guys broadening the product into? I mean, you said that you cover a lot of industries. I mean, how horizontal is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing industry specific per se, but we started in mostly technology venture backed companies. We now have a lot of financial services, professional services. So it tends to be like these more skilled workers. But then we have increasingly also large insurance brokerages or other companies that are hiring operations people. Even some of our customers in AI are like hybrid, where they have software teams, but then also have like field workers that are working on energy, for example. So we have like some really interesting companies. And if there's this volume hiring component, that's another area where AI and automation is really important, because you're dealing with even more applicants, and the process becomes really overwhelming if you don't have good tooling. So we launched things like texting to candidates for like these higher volume roles. And so we're seeing quite a bit of expansion across, yeah, pretty much every industry in the end is like hiring to some degree. What we don't do today is like, McDonald's or Burger King or other like purely high volume. These tend to be like specialized products that are really focused on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And how the market is primarily in the U.S.?
It's about 70% US, 20% EMEA, and then the rest is rest of the world. So we do have customers in dozens of countries at this point. And EMEA, we stumbled into a little bit. I'm from Germany originally, moved to the US like 12 years ago, and we had some early customers there. And the market is actually quite similar, especially in the UK, the Netherlands, like the English-speaking countries. There are a lot of technology companies that operate very similar to like US companies. And so we have a pretty big team there now too, and a big customer base.
Yeah.
Obviously, our European counterparts are more skeptic when it comes to AI usage. So that's probably relevant for this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And are you guys venture funded, or are you bootstrapped? And how is that journey going?
Yeah, we are venture funded, and but we've been really efficient with our capital, and uh, you know we're kind of like in a control your own destiny situation now, which is quite nice. We have the opportunity to invest in a business and grow it, but we don't need to rely on additional outside capital. Um, but yeah, I think we made it kind of through the trough of 2021, 2022 companies, largely because we were still pretty early as a business. And then we've been growing really nicely over the last couple of years. So it's put us in a nice position.
And is the ambition then to eventually become an all-in-one HR platform? I mean, beyond hiring, or are you going to stick to the hiring
That's the
lane?
part that you're teasing out of me that we don't talk too much about publicly. But there's definitely a bigger ambition across broader kind of talent management, if you will. And my co-founder and I, we wanted to start this company to hopefully work on it indefinitely and build a large independent business. And so to do that, we'll have to expand over time. And again, we're not talking too much details, but there's definitely a bigger kind of ambition behind what we're doing.
Yeah. And to keep up, I mean, you're an engineer yourself, so to keep up with the advancements, I mean, it's as a journalist, it's hard to keep up. I can't imagine trying to build something and every other day there's a new model or a new capability, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a
I
good
mean, is
question. Yeah.
I
I,
was going to say, is the product always like two steps behind, the cutting edge of the research?
yeah, that's a good question. I think the interesting thing is if you have a background in software engineering and you are deploying these LLMs in practice, you develop a certain intuition for things. And the reality is, in the space right now, there's a lot of noise. It's like, again, this model won this benchmark, and this
Mm,
model had this breakthrough performance on this benchmark. But a lot of these benchmarks are not one-to-one correlated to actual practical improvements on real world applications. And so um, there's actually more noise than actual real progress or change
yeah.
in the capabilities. And so what we are doing in practice is our engineering team experiments a lot with new tools. If new models come out, we've built a way to try them out against our benchmarks, and we can quickly prototype things. But I'd say the progress has been slower than it seems on outside on like material progress on what I'd call like general intelligence of these models. So, but we're definitely behind. We're not doing cutting edge research. We're waiting to see which models are really good at a certain thing, and then we're carefully deploying it into the product. We hiring is a sensitive area, and we don't want to, we don't want to experiment with that process. Instead, we're testing, validating, and then rolling stuff out that feels we're really confident in. Yeah.
Yeah. And does the platform, agents is what everyone's talking about these days.
Yes.
Does it have an agentic layer where, the user can ask it to do something and it'll go out and
Yep. Not today. So
yeah.
again, we've been kind of careful in when we roll things out, and we've been really focused on like this task level assistance, so candidate assistant, AI app review, note taker, kind of these discrete tasks that LMs are really, really good at. We're now building towards an agentic layer and trying to see what is actually possible. There's some areas of the product where I think this could work really well. Interview scheduling is a good example, where we automate a lot of the pieces to get ready today. And what
Mhm.
an agentic workflow would do is like glue these together, and
Right.
instead of a human doing like these small intermediate steps, we can have the system do it. But agentic is another big buzzword out there, and there's definitely some real progress, but also there's not that much stuff in production yet that's working really well on complicated, long running tasks. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything I'm not talking about that you want listeners to hear?
yeah. That's a good question. I think I shied around the fundraising question because I wasn't sure when this is going to air, but we are. By the time this is live, we will have announced a $50 million Series D. So
Okay.
that's kind of exciting for kind of further investment into our product and AI. And you can learn more about Ashby at ashbyhq.com. We're hiring across all teams. We're still employing a lot of humans and paying them a lot of money to improve the product and the business. So these are probably the most important things. And then maybe lastly, yeah, if you're on the job market and interviewing, I think it's helpful to have some empathy with the recruiting teams on the other side, and it's not an easy job to sift through like a lot of people that are interested in joining really interesting companies. So yeah, hope we could shine some light on both sides of the table today.
And beyond tech, what's the strongest vertical that you guys have worked
Yeah,
in?
professional services, broadly speaking, is probably that area. Similar where the return to really strong talent is quite high, and it's generally competitive to hire senior people. So that's kind of another industry, and financial services is kind of adjacent to that.
Just generally, maybe sum up with how the HR function or hiring practices are evolving, and whether will there come a time when uh, an HR function, when you can apply, give it the platform access to your social media or whatever, um, maybe your past writing, if you've been writing papers and that sort of thing, and the platform will do sort of a holistic read of all these candidates. I mean, how deep a look can these platforms, or do you think these platforms will be able to take at individual candidates?
Yeah, it's a good question. I definitely think the models out there today already have like obviously these like web search capabilities, and so that's something we're looking into. And like beyond the resume, is there other data points that we can collect for certain roles that are kind of publicly out there? Um, I don't. I do think some of the core problems about recruiting will stay the same, which is it's a matchmaking problem similar to dating or other matchmaking problems, and
Yeah.
there's always an issue of like imbalance of supply and demand. And if the process gets more efficient on both sides, we may just end up with like more candidates applying to more jobs, more jobs getting more applicants. But we're still going to run into the issue of like in the end, we probably need humans to kind of figure out the best possible fit. And so we are again really kind of focused on how can we give companies the right tools to filter for these folks faster. But I think the core of the recruiting job probably won't change too drastically, and I don't think it will be automated away anytime soon. Similar to some other roles we talked about earlier, where you need a lot of context about a business, because a lot of these roles are pretty specific to a specific team people are joining or the challenges the
Yeah.
business is facing. So it's the role of the recruiting team. So I think there's a lot of change. Our goal is really to get rid of the drudgery of the process and get people to focus on the core skills as much as possible. I think we're making some good progress.
Where does the name Ashby come from?
That is a great question. When we started a company, we wanted a name that's not specific to any one product. And so because we wanted to expand to multiple products over time, we wanted the domain to be available, the trademark to be available, and something short. And so we brainstormed for a couple of weeks, and this was actually a street name in the East Bay of San Francisco, where
Yeah.
between my house and my co-founder's house. So, and we were like, this is fine enough, and it's definitely grown onto us over time and worked pretty well. But that's kind of the
Yeah.
logical
Yeah.
process by which we arrived at it.
Our sponsor for this episode is Extreme Networks, the company radically improving customer experiences with AI-powered automation for networking. Extreme is driving the convergence of AI, networking, and security to transform the way businesses connect and protect their networks to deliver faster performance, stronger security, and a seamless user experience. Visit extremenetworks.com to learn more. That's Extreme Networks, all run together.com to learn more.